I'm going to start calling it Little Hannah.
Well, that's what I used to do with the Lauras.
Big Laura, Little
Big
Laura.
Laura, Little
That
Laura.
worked, though. I
That
don't
did
know why.
work, didn't it?
Yeah.
But anyway, right, should we go? Easy clap. Do you know what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, today we're going to talk about a very common marketing question, which is how much social media is too much for your strategy? Or do you know what? A nice way to put it. What's the right balance for a business? So obviously there's so many platforms out there. There's a lot going on. It's very easy to get overwhelmed quite quickly. Very easy to just throw yourself all in on every single channel, which isn't necessarily the best process. So it's just talking about, what's the right balance for a business, and what the core things to focus on are. So the sort of things to cover today then are role of social media in a modern marketing strategy, how to assess the right amount of social media content for a business, pros and cons of platforms, and how to measure return on investment, which I think is a super important one. So let's get stuck in. So, first point, why is social media such a critical part of any marketing strategy? Very broad.
Yeah, but it's where people are, isn't it?
That's it. Direct line. That's it.
Where the attention is, so you've got to be there.
And I think a lot of brands forget that. They're like, well, it's not relevant to us because we're not an Instagram brand or we're not a TikTok brand. But it's like, well, it doesn't matter because that's where lots of your potential customers are sat there, not necessarily scrolling content about your sector or about their day-to-day jobs, but they're sat on there scrolling anyway, so you can still get in front of them.
Yeah, I think you've just got to be smart about it. Timing, like accountants are on TikTok at 8 p.m. when they finish work.
Yeah.
So, and I've seen content on TikTok of Excel tutorials that has millions of views. So I think their capability of getting in front of the right people is possible across most networks that have got volume. Definitely.
And I think that's where like the spreadsheet example is a brilliant one, because we've kind of all seen that, but we've probably there's lots of people that won't have seen that because they don't use spreadsheets, but that's how clever that algorithm is. It knows that we use a spreadsheet day to day, so it'll throw that in front of us. And I think that's the bit that people forget. They're like, oh well, people scroll Instagram to, I don't know, leave their job and just look at clothes and recipes and da-da-da. But actually, no, whatever comes in front of them is to do with what else they're looking at elsewhere and what they're actually interested in. And people kind of forget that that is part of the algorithm.
Yeah, I mean, but it's always going to catch your eye if it's something to do with something that you either know or are passionate about, regardless of whether it's work-related.
I think that links quite nicely into my next point as well, which is obviously paid social. So paid social is a brilliant tool because, like we said, your audience there, but many brands have done paid social without actually having any social presence. So they've just thrown an ad out there without actually having any existing audience on the platform linked to their brand. Yes, you can target specific people and put that in front of them, but how much more powerful is that social ad if you've already got presence on there and you've already got a following?
Yeah, I think the rise of direct to consumer brands like fast e-com brands on Instagram, for example, have almost taken too much of an advantage with that.
Yep.
Where they just go in, because the targeting's so good, they just pepper people with ads for one transaction. Whereas I think a more effective strategy is to try to think about not interrupting people, but to fit into their life almost.
Yep.
I think that's a much more valuable long-term approach.
And again, a really good way to do that is with influencers. And influencers exist in every single niche now. It's not just about fashion. It's not just, restaurants. It's literally, there is an influencer for everything now. And that feels much more seamless than an ad thrown in your face, because you're probably scrolling through, your social media feed or scrolling through stories and seeing people talking to camera or seeing real life interactions. And if a brand can pull that off, putting a person in front of you rather than just a direct graphic and an ad, that's so much more powerful.
Yeah. It makes me sad that we're losing that real human life, face-to-face connection, though. People are replacing that with these kind of people.
Yeah, true. Like, you used to have a bit more of, like, brand advocates, wouldn't you? Like, from internal within the business that would almost become the face of it. And now that's being panned off a little bit more to somebody that's already made a name.
Yeah, higher ROI.
Yeah, that's it. So how do you know if you're doing enough on social media?
I think frequency is tricky.
It is.
Frequency is tricky because I think the more content you put out by the numbers, you're going to get more out of it. But it's finding a balance between that content delivering value and the purpose of it. I think the purpose of it needs to be brand led, but it's difficult because it comes down to budget, it comes down to resource, and even things like you get these gurus who are like, just film a video and then spin that video into 13 pieces of content across, and they multiply it and you end up with 300 pieces of content. Great, perfectly viable. However, the resource it takes to spin out all that content is a problem for some brands,
Yeah,
especially
definitely,
smaller brands. So I think there's a lot of people that talk about you need to post daily, need to do it daily, need to do 3 posts a day. Yeah, frequency helps, but value for me needs to be in there.
Yeah, I think people jump on that thing, and it's not necessarily in terms of like it's all to do with the algorithm. They're like, oh, the algorithm wants you to post daily. But if you're posting daily just for the sake of it, it's not going to give you any points against the algorithm. If it's just not valuable content and you're just doing it for the sake of it, that will not help you, because those algorithms are a lot smarter than that. To go back 10 years, you could post on Instagram daily and you could grow really, really quick. It wouldn't really matter that your content wasn't that specialist, it wasn't that niche. That was kind of, because it was early days of the platform, they were literally just driving growth. But now it's so dilute, like everything is so much more diluted because of the quantity that's out there. They're looking way more at who's actually providing more value, who's actually giving something back, who's actually specifying what they're talking about and really focusing in on a niche and what their topic is.
Yeah, I think it's got to be done for the user, in my opinion. Everything should. Search, social, every strategy needs to start with the user. And it's going to be an interesting 12 months because AI is going to enable speed when it comes to content creation.
Yeah.
And that's going to be tricky for platforms to work out where the value is.
And that's going to be where quantity is going to be less important.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, the quality of like video generation, for example, is publicly in its infancy. Technologically, it's very advanced.
Yep.
When that becomes a commodity, the amount of video content you're going to see on social will increase exponentially, whereas at the moment, it's the preferred format. Because it's easier to determine value because it takes more effort and energy to produce a good video. But that's going to disappear soon.
What do you think it's going to go back to? What more focus on?
I don't know what the focus is going to be on, but I think it's going to be really tricky for platforms like Instagram and TikTok to determine where the value actually is, because the capability of someone to spin it out using AI and it look the same from a user's perspective, it's just going to be blurred.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're already starting to see it. And starting to see it a lot within, I know we've touched on ads already, but starting to see it in those ads. You know, a lot of the things that are coming out now where they're using celebrities to try and endorse products that the celebrities have nothing to do with, but they're doing it through AI. That's where the lines are already really starting to blur.
It's going to come down to craft. I think you're going to be able to feel craft when it comes down to someone that's made something and it's valuable and it adds value. That's going to be the differentiator. I think it's got to be. Because the volume of AI content will become apparent quite quickly. I think it's like when we were talking about influencers on another episode, it's going to go full circle. There'll be AI influencers. There is AI influencers.
Yeah.
Brands will use it, ruin it, and it will come back to real people.
There's been some brands trying to do that already, though. They've had some real backlash.
but there's brands that have done it successfully as well, and there are agencies that have done it successfully where they've created influencers that are generating tens of thousands of dollars in revenue per month.
I wonder whether there'll be a big switch back to live content.
Events are going to be big,
but you know, like
real community.
Yeah,
is gonna
community, and that's where I think every social media strategy should be leading towards some sort of community. But you know, in terms of like live content, like TikTok lives, Instagram lives were a thing for a bit. They've kind of died off a bit. TikTok lives still kind of happening. I wouldn't say they're massive, but maybe that's just because it's not something that I watch. Maybe they are in other circles. But that live content where you know you're in front of somebody and you know they're directly answering your questions, you're seeing it there and then. I wonder whether that will become more important as we're getting more AI content.
We will get to a point where AI content looks like that, though.
Very true. And it could answer a question live on screen.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at what happened with TV shopping in China,
yeah,
that's now starting to spread its wings on TikTok.
Oh, yeah.
Through TikTok
I love
Shop.
those videos.
And it's down to that experience. That's real life. It's almost like a 2D human interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's clearly effective, and it's clearly something that people want, but I think it needs to go one step further than that. And I think real people in real life events are going to be the end point. I think you've got to have the capability of having a real community.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't know what that's going to look like on social.
It's changed already. It's changed massively, and I think it will keep changing. But
I think it all comes down to trust as well. If you think about a brand, you build a brand. Generally, you build a good brand. It provides the opportunity for longevity, but also then the trust associated with it, which can be lost immediately. It's tricky, but if you've got it, you can carry a community that means that they know and will be able to differentiate between what's real, what's not, where the value is, where it isn't. So brand, I've been saying brand for, I don't know, 20 years, and it's only now becoming less performance, more brand.
yeah, definitely. I think as well, so going back to what we're talking about in terms of enough, like what's enough on social media, data.
Yeah, you've got access to however many data points.
People don't bloody use it, do they?
I think it's, yeah, in terms of...
There's no point in throwing out loads of data, throwing out loads of posts every single day if you know that you only really get engagement on a weekend.
Yeah, I think you measure what you can and you've got to pay attention, definitely. Mm-hmm. But it all starts with the user.
Yeah, definitely.
100%.
But data can give you an insight into that user.
Yeah, I think if you're smart and you pay attention and things that make sense, like timing, we've touched on time of day.
Yeah.
Weekends, you've got to figure that out.
Yeah.
But that again comes down to building the proper audience, doesn't it?
Yeah, and understanding your audience, yeah. Okay, so do you think it's better to be active on multiple platforms or focus on one or two?
I think gone are the days where the pressure to be on Facebook, because it's Facebook, it's gone.
But then it's not one to be laughed at because it's still got a very active
100%.
audience.
And you can't ignore it. The volume is ridiculous, and the platform is great.
It is, yeah.
And the capabilities are amazing.
And it's a great place to build a community, like we talk about. It's got groups, it's got the functionality. They're actually groups that people genuinely interact with and get put in front of you without you being in them, which nothing else really does that.
Yeah, what I would say is you've got to think about the content that you're capable of creating and then understand how to execute it on the platform that you're choosing. I think a mistake that I've seen consistently is transferring one format across multiple networks.
Yeah, just posting it on everything, not changing the caption, not changing how you've done it, nothing, literally just bang it out.
It doesn't work. You've got to create native content, which is, again, where it comes down to time, resource, budget. You've just got to do what makes sense, and I think you've got to try and understand whether a platform makes sense for your business and the audience that you're trying to build. And it might be that TikTok's absolutely perfect. It's got the right demographic, and you go all in on that, and you spend your energy and your resource and whatever availability you've got to build content that works on TikTok.
So I'd always say to people, I would focus on one first.
100%.
I'd always go on one first. I'd look for the one that your audience is most active on, or where you think you could hit your audience the most. And I'd focus on that, because then it's easier to, once you've established, obviously if you've got the resource to go after loads, amazing, but most people don't. And if you focus on one, you build up an audience on that, the likelihood is that audience does use other social media platforms. So you've kind of already got them there waiting to follow you elsewhere as well. But if you've nailed it on one, it's much easier to then go to another one, rather than trying to build up separate communities in every single one, which you're doing in the start point. Nail it on one, move on to another.
Yeah.
And build it steadily like that.
Yeah, I agree. There is nuance between the content that works on each platform.
Yep.
I think the efficacy of just pushing a video across all platforms just depletes how well it's going to do.
Definitely. Ooh, I like this one. What are key metrics businesses should focus on to measure return on investment? Engagement rate. Engagement rate.
This is tricky.
Engagement rate. Next, people would just go for views.
Impressions. Yeah, it's tough. Engagement is obviously a validation for community, which is what you're trying to build. So it would definitely be up there. But I think people get overwhelmed by the sheer volume of metrics that you can track.
Oh, no, I agree with that. And that's why I'd always say engagement rate is the one thing that you should really focus on. That and whatever your other goal is. So when you're putting out social content, you should have some sort of goal in mind, whether that's website traffic, newsletter sign-ups, I don't know, sending them to other social media platforms to follow you there, whatever that is, you should have that secondary purpose as well. And that should be a second metric every single time.
I think that's where a lot of brands get it wrong, though, because the primary purpose is conversion. When it's not really or it shouldn't be treated as a conversion channel.
No, because no social media platform wants to send people out of their app.
Yep.
Ever. They want to keep people in the platform.
But it's hard for some brands to connect the fact that building audience native is going to translate to brand awareness, which translates to
long-term conversion.
Better outcomes for whether you're selling a product or you're looking at leads, whatever your business is.
Yep, definitely. And then I think the other one that is, again, really focuses on the community aspect, and there's a lot of brands that do this very well, is how your audience are actually talking about you. And this is something that I think a lot of brands forget to actually look at. Look at where you be mentioned, what your audience is actually talking about on TikTok to do with your brand. And there are some brands that do it really well and really like leverage user-generated content, like Starbucks is a good example of it. They push user-generated content, they promote it, they really use it as a really big part of their strategy, and that's how they built up such a dedicated community and such an amazing brand online.
Makes people feel special.
Of course it does.
It's easy to do if you've got the brand.
You feel like you've got a little bit of fame. Yeah, exactly. Ooh, what are the risks of doing too much?
I referenced trust earlier
trust
when it comes
to
community, and it's so fragile to maintain. But I think frequency is one thing, and going back to what I said about trying not to interrupt people but to fit into their life is what I would try and keep in mind. And it also comes down to, like we've just been saying, about selecting the platform where you're going to double down on making sure that content works on that platform.
Fits in that feed, yeah.
I think frequency is a tricky one because it's so easy to fall into that noisy category where you're just doing too much and people are like, you just need to fucking chill.
Yeah, and I think there's two aspects to it. You get the brands that are literally just posting the same thing over and over again, and you know what? Nothing makes me unfollow a brand quicker because you are so bored of seeing it. And yes, there is obviously things to it. We know how many times you have to put a message in front of somebody for them to actually be aware. Is it 8? Something like that? You have to put...
No idea on
It's like a marketing fact. I want to say it's like 8 times you have to put a message in front of somebody before they actually take notice of it. And it goes into their brain, basically. But if you just keep putting on the same post, that is not the same thing.
But it goes to the culture of direct response, doesn't it? And I think COVID really, really accelerated people focusing on performance marketing and
Yep.
pounds in, pounds out.
Yep.
How much am I going to get?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, performance worked through COVID because a lot of the population were sat there, and the ones that were still able to work had more disposable income.
Yep.
And they weren't able to go anywhere.
Yep.
So from an e-com and a product standpoint, win-win. So performance got shiny through COVID, and now it's turning, and people are understanding that people have got less cash. It's harder to build loyalty, and performance isn't the answer.
And people aren't going to part ways with their money if they don't trust it anymore. And they're not just going to be like, oh yeah, fine, tenner. Like, tenner? No.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sadly, it's definitely happening.
Yeah. Massively. All right, nice. So, yeah.
Good detail.
Good detail. So, yeah. That was a bit of a summary of what we've talked about. So, basically, everybody should be at least considering social media as part of the marketing strategy, I think, is what we've established. However you do that is dependent on your goals, on your business, on, you know, what you actually want to get out of it and what resource you can put towards it. And obviously quality over quantity, which we'd say about anything, I think. But it's one people forget when it comes to social. But yeah, if anybody watching this has any questions about social media, wants to chat to us about anything we've talked about here.
Anything at all.
Yeah, please feel free to reach out. And then we've got this or that.
Good.
Okay, this or that. So, posting daily versus posting weekly. It depends.
Yeah.
It does depend, yeah. That one does.
It kind of does. I mean, yeah.
I'd say posting weekly with a better quality post over posting daily with posting for the sake of it.
There's a lot of variables as well.
There is a lot of
How many
variables.
networks? What's the outcome that you're looking for? What's your goal?
Let's move on.
Both work. Both work. Circumstantial.
You're going to say the same thing for this next one. Instagram versus TikTok for brand awareness. I actually think it's easier to reach people on TikTok now.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree. I think the volume is there.
I think you spend longer scrolling on it.
But I think TikTok have landed on at a point where the algorithm is very, very effective at keeping you on platform as well.
Yeah, I know, it's dangerous.
Like so effective.
It's so dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay. Engagement focus versus follower growth focus.
Engagement.
Yeah, I would say engagement. I do think follower growth is really important because that's a clear indicator of growing that community, but it also doesn't necessarily mean it's an engaged community.
The long-term benefits of having 50 followers that really die-hard want to be following you versus 1,000 that have just followed you because they did
You
it
ran
by
a
accident
competition
or you ran a competition.
They're the posts that I hate, and I always tell people, yes, they're fine, but people use them as their only growth tool, and it's like, you can't do that. Anyway, next one. Organic social versus paid social.
Ooh, I think organic is harder but better for a long-term community, and I think paid social is wildly underpriced in the market, and the targeting capabilities are quite ridiculous. So as a way of generating revenue, undeniable.
But I would never say you should do paid social.
Across social.
I don't think you should ever do paid social without doing some organic social. Whereas you can do organic social without doing paid.
Yeah, I think that they go hand in hand, but it's budget dependent.
It is.
I think the energy that it takes to build an organic strategy and for that to deliver community growth is just better long term.
Definitely.
It's effort. Unfortunately, we live in a world where you actually have to put effort in to get a yield.
No, it's so hard, isn't it?
But once you hit it, it's great.
Yeah, it is.
And it'll last.
And it's special.
Yeah.
Nice.
Nice.